I can take over? Folks, I'm calling us back to order. No, you are free to choose. How many people enjoyed their snack? How many people are resuscitated? So there's a literature, my wife's mentor, the Nobel laureate Robert Fogel, did research that soldiers given more calories fought better. So now that you've had this injection of food, I want the questions to be even better. Folks, and the questions were outstanding in the first hour. I want to start with something controversial. That at break, there are several faculty members here, and one of my colleagues made an excellent point that my list was incomplete, and surely it is incomplete. And this faculty member said to me, Matt, another key aspect of cities is the diversity of the population. And he argued correctly that those cities that are more diverse, and I'm seeing talking in the back row, the professor has a photographic memory and a very huge ego, which are correlated. A politically correct statement that is true is that cities that are more diverse offer quality of life benefits. For example, imagine a city in Italy that only had Italian food from one part of the country. That might get a little boring. In cities that are more diverse, people can learn more from each other. The greatness of New York City as a city is the high density of interaction with people who are different than you. And I certainly agree with that. But folks, now let me say something more controversial. There are also costs of diversity, and I recognize that Singapore is a diverse city. Los Angeles is a highly diverse city. Folks, in Los Angeles and in the United States, there's often gridlock about what's good public policy. When people differ, they will have different priorities. If we were all identical, suppose everyone in this room was identical, and suppose we have to choose between chocolate and vanilla ice cream. Is it going to be a tough decision? We're going to vote 100-0. We're all going to agree that chocolate's better than vanilla. But when you have to make a group decision, when people have different preferences, you then get gridlock. And so it's a fascinating issue in nations that there are benefits of urban diversity, and I believe that. But you can also get political disagreement about priorities. And when there's disagreement about priorities, you can often have gridlock. And I would say that the reason for gridlock in U.S. politics right now is diversity. That we have very different views on what is good governance. We've got young people and old people. Rich people want to pay no taxes, and poor people want redistribution. That's diversity. And what's good public policy when people differ is a very interesting issue. And so I do celebrate diversity, but it's important to think about the governance challenge becomes harder when there's more disagreement about priorities. With that said, lecture number 2. Let's do it. So I want to hit some classic themes in real estate, and I have a feeling that folks are going to know everything I'm going to say. And so we can quickly cut through this and let you guys go to sleep. Let me show you a $3.4 million home. So in Singapore dollars, this would be about 4 million Singapore dollars. Does this look like heaven to you? So location, location, location. This is a home 14 blocks from the LA beach. And I don't know about you, so this is a 3,000 square foot home on a 7,500 square foot lot built a long time ago, has 3.5 toilets. Do any of you need multiple toilets? And they want $4 million. Folks, how many of you are going to buy this thing? If you had the money, how many want it? And so it's a fascinating question that this is an equilibrium price. Someone's going to pay this in LA. If the same house were east 30 miles in, it would probably sell for $400,000. Of the fascinating issue of location in modern real estate. So, of course, the thought experiment I want you to do is take your hand and just start dropping it in different places where your hand is a house. The same house priced in different neighborhoods in different cities has a very different price. And we can read, do these words talk you into purchasing this? It's interesting. But this home will sell for this price. And of course, we don't get a law of one price with real estate. The same house sells for a very different price depending on what city and what neighborhood it's located in. And folks, this fascinates me, whether it's in the United States or I'm going to show you some evidence from China in a moment. And I'm sure the same evidence holds in Singapore. So there's several things to think about here. In the United States right now, there's a huge debate about income inequality. The 1% are the richest 1%. The 99% is everyone else. Folks, if homes are $3.4 million for this thing, 14 blocks from the beach, are there going to be any poor people in Santa Monica? Short answer is no, but the city's leaders have introduced rent control as a way to bring in poor people, to allow poor people to live there. But economists for years have railed against rent control. Is that part of your curriculum here? Does Singapore have rent control? Well, Santa Monica still does. And so it's the point I want to bring out, because you folks are already looking sleepy and she's glaring at me. The point I want to bring out in these lectures is, in a world where quality costs more, how are scarce assets allocated across people of different income levels? And if an area becomes nicer, either because of the Clean Air Act or other regulation, will middle class and poor people benefit from this, or will all the blue sky gains go to the rich? I think it's an interesting question late at night, which we're going to talk about. So I'm very and let's do another. How many of you are young renters in this room? How many are young? How many are renters? Folks, as prices go up, up, who faces a problem? As an owner, I love it. I plan to give my son enough money so it never works. He can have the life I always wanted. So the Carnegie conjecture is if you give your children too much money, they don't work. And so Andrew Carnegie gave all his money away to universities, wanting his children to still have a killer instinct. In general equilibrium, if home prices rise, young renters face less opportunity. The flip side of rising prices is it limits opportunity to young people. Of course it makes old guys who are owners richer, but the flip side is less opportunity for young people. For local governments who care about both their young and older residents, I'm fascinated by the question from local government officials' perspective as they think about introducing new regulations, whether it's road pricing, whether it's Clean Air Act regulation, whether it's zoning. How do those regulations affect different communities, both the quality of life and the pricing of real estate? And I have no idea why I have this of planting trees. That must have been a joke, but I must not have been sober at that moment. Folks, too much research has been done in the United States, and I know why that is. It's because we have very good data. And I think something very exciting in urban and real estate economics is that more and more research is going to be done in up-and-coming cities and nations. And a lot of that's going to be in Asia, thanks to the excellent researchers here and to increased access to data. But too many U.S. real estate papers. And so I want to talk about something from China. So with my good friend Siqi Zheng of Tsinghua University, I want to show you just a little bit of some, from real estate, I want to show you a little bit of real estate pricing within Beijing. And if this hypnotizes anyone, you can just give me a thumbs down. How many subscribe to the Journal of Urban Economics? Tianfu? Tough crowd. So here's what we did. And of course, I don't subscribe to it. But hey, let's skip this. Ooh, let's skip this. Let's skip this. Let's go to this. Folks, this is Beijing. This is Tiananmen Square. Here are the ring roads. And what Siqi did in a terrific piece of data work was we collected data on every apartment tower sale in the years 2005 and 2006. So think of the years. Does everyone remember 2005, 2006? Had we heard of Lady Gaga then? Yeah, can we all go back in time? I had more hair then. Can you imagine yourself in 2005? Tough group. So for every apartment unit that sold in Beijing in 2005 and 2006, we know its price per square foot. Can anyone agree that's mildly interesting? We can talk about the noodles that get out there. What Sichi and I wanted to know is, where is the expensive real estate in Beijing and why? And so we could have some hypotheses. And so we made a map of where was the expensive real estate. The monocentric model. So how many folks love their monocentric model of cities? If I say monocentric, raise your hand if you love that word. Raise your hand if you know what that word means. So the monocentric model, as we all know, and I'm going to start to dance like a dancing American, the monocentric model says that the jobs and the action in a city are downtown, and because we hate to commute, land per square foot, land is going to be more expensive downtown. If we had access to a helicopter, land wouldn't have to be more expensive downtown because you could just jump in your helicopter, get downtown, and parachute where you want to go. But since we have to walk or drive, land is more expensive close to the city center. In fact, Professor Fu and Sichi wrote a great paper that came out in the Journal of Urban Economics in 2006, I think. I used to subscribe to it, where Professor Fu and Sichi documented where richer people tend to live in the city, and I believe richer people live downtown. What we do in our study is we ask the following environmental question. We use GIS analysis. So how many of you have taken a GIS class? That few? I don't believe you. We use GIS software to put on a map where is the bad air pollution in Beijing. That's these big circles here, versus where's the cleaner air, that's the little circles near Tsinghua. We also graphed where are the public parks, where are the universities with green space, where are the bus lines, and where are the subway lines. And we asked the following question. We asked the question of, let's do it here. All else equal, do apartments closer to public transit, closer to green space, in lower air pollution parts of the city, do they sell for a price premium? The answer to all of these questions is yes. And folks, for the folks glaring at me, why is this interesting? And China's a communist country. That was supposed to be a joke. In a communist country, there's no link between prices are just set at some level, and then there's lines for everything, and prices don't reflect quality. Prices are just set arbitrarily. In capitalism, prices reflect quality. UCLA's raising its tuition. We can only do that if we raise our quality. A Mercedes has a higher price than some car from somewhere else. In capitalism, higher quality products sell for a higher price, whether it's a purse, a TV, a professor. Higher quality products sell for higher prices. Taking that very standard compensating differentials logic, we asked, in this so-called communist country, what are the characteristics of neighborhoods where the price per square foot is higher? And just like in U.S. cities, we found the same patterns, that because the downtown is so sexy and fun, it is the center of government and center of jobs, proximity to the city center is valuable, proximity to public transit is valuable, time is money. But in terms of environmental factors, properties, all else equal, properties closer to green space, public parks, and properties close to in the good air quality parts of the city sold for a price premium. And so the ingredients you need to do such a study are as follows. You need actual sales price data on housing. You need to know the physical attributes of these housing. You need to know their street address so that you can put them on a map. And you need some government data on the local public goods, such as school quality, public parks, air pollution. And then you use standard hedonic methods to quantify how much people value the amenity in question. So folks, I wanted to do a piece of algebra so that everyone would hate me. Is everyone ready for some algebra? That sounded enthusiastic. Here we go. Let there be 3 communities, and this could be in Los Angeles, this could be in Singapore, this could be in Bangkok. There's 3 communities. And let's make the big assumption that the communities only differ with respect to their pollution level. There's ways to use statistical methods to control for other factors. Let's make the big assumption that they only differ with respect to pollution. The researcher observes that in the clean community that only has 10 nasty pollution days a year, that home prices are $300,000 on average. There is a moderately polluted community that's polluted 30 days a year, and its home price is $200,000 on average. And there's a nasty community who suffers from 60 polluted days, 2 months of bad pollution, and the average home price is $100,000. What the hedonic researcher nerd does is the following. Folks, what do you implicitly pay for clean air if you move from this community to this community? You pay an extra $100,000 in rent, 300 minus 200, but you get 20 cleaner days. So you calculate the change in home price from moving from the moderate community to the clean community, and you divide that by how many clean days you achieve. And a real estate economist would say you're paying $5,000. A person who chooses to live here has voluntarily paid $5,000 per clean to avoid a dirty day, because the opportunity cost is she could have lived here and saved $100,000. So folks, this picture is the basis of about 5 billion economics papers. We learn about you from the choices you make. If we see a household live in the expensive but clean community when they could have lived in the cheaper but dirty community, we learn something about how much you have to pay for green amenities, and that you are willing to pay this premium reveals that a lower bound on your willingness to pay must be $5,000. So this is how we play the game. Any questions on my algebra here? You're supposed to boo. You're supposed to be amazed that this is what I've spent my life doing. But let me tell you why it's interesting. Folks, the fascinating thing about clean air is there's no market for it. With something like a Starbucks cappuccino, we have markets. So Starbucks charges the price in Newtown. I've been charged 5 Singapore dollars for a cappuccino. Every morning you could see me walk in and buy it like a zombie. So every morning, if you're there at 7, I walk in and I give the $5. Folks, it's funny and true. You immediately learn, because we have a market for Starbucks, that I value a cup of coffee at least $5. Because folks, do we all agree that if I only valued Starbucks coffee at $1, I never would have paid $5? And so when we have a market, when you see a market price, $5 for a cappuccino, and when you see an old dude buy the cappuccino, you get a lower bound on how much I'm willing to pay. I might be willing to pay $88 for it. I might be willing to pay $1 trillion for it, but I'm willing to pay at least $5 for it. In the case of environmental attributes, it's very interesting to ask, how much does the population value avoiding pollution? To judge whether environmental regulation is good, we need measures of the benefits of reducing pollution. Because there's no explicit market for pollution, we need to use these indirect methods to learn about how much the population values not being exposed to pollution. So studying the demand for environmental green city attributes is actually hard because we don't have explicit markets. We have Starbucks markets. It's easy to study the demand for Starbucks coffee. It's much harder to study the demand for clean streets, for roads without much traffic, for green parks, for low pollution. And so economists and real estate experts have had to be very creative to study this. Yes. So the big idea in this picture is that there's no free lunch. If you want a nicer house, you're going to have to pay more. And as I just said from my Starbucks example, if you're willing to pay to live in the best community, oops, I'm out of control. If you're willing to pay this premium of $100,000 to live in the best community, you're revealing that you value avoiding pollution by more than $5,000 because you always could have lived in this community and saved the $5,000 and paid $100,000 less. Yes. So a point that I've wrestled with in my career, in which I don't think I've made that much progress on, is, folks, let me ask you a question. If you're the leader of Singapore, what's the optimal, how clean should the air be in Singapore? And before you jump and say that it should be perfectly clean, well, you tell me. Wait, don't look at my stupid slide. Look at my ugly face. Folks, why, if the leaders of Singapore said, we're going to remove all pollution, should the people cheer? What would be the challenge if that was announced that that's what's going to be done? So we're all going to get a tattoo that says zero pollution. And we all cheer saying that's awesome. But what happens the next day when we sober up? So there would be a tax increase. What else would happen to Singapore society if we went ahead with the goal of zero pollution? Would there be any buses at NUS taking young people to their rooms? To their classrooms? There might be electric, so I like that. We have a technological optimist here. Folks, would there be any electricity, though? Does Singapore get its electricity from natural gas or coal, or it can't be all renewable? So natural gas does pollute. It pollutes less than coal, but natural gas does create pollution. So because natural gas power plants create pollution, there'd be no more electricity. Folks, how would my computer be doing? So we would have a zero pollution, but of course there are trade-offs, which is the point I'm trying to make at this late hour, that if we insisted on zero pollution and if we don't have renewable power, then we would have no transportation, we would have no electricity, and all our food would rot, and all the traffic lights would be, I'm not sure what color, and things would just begin to go haywire. And so economists are boring with their trade-offs, but in environmental economics, we can never get away from trade-offs. And so a very important issue in thinking about green cities is how much do the people who live in a city value small improvements in the city's quality of life? And what can be done to measure that? Do you survey the people? Do you study real estate prices? Do you study tourism patterns? So let's do tourism for a second. Folks, Singapore appears to have many tourists. If a city had no tourists at all, that would suggest to me that it must have low quality of life, that tourists are voting with their feet to go somewhere else. And so there's many different ways that a creative statistician can use data to judge whether the city is desirable. And to think about if Singapore improved its air quality, would more tourists show up or other metrics of improvements in quality of life? As you guys alluded to improve air pollution in the city, we would have to think about what would be the costs. What factories would be shut down? Would there have to be bans on driving? Would electricity prices go up? These would be the types of decisions government officials would have to grapple with. Coming back to her excellent point, if there was electricity that could be generated with wind and solar power, then there would be the win-win of Singapore being a green city, but having electric vehicles and having electricity generated by wind and solar. And so the renewable power sector is a crucial part of the equation of achieving green cities at low social cost. And I'm going to be coming back to that later in our lectures. Do we want to do this? Is this going to kill everybody? I do want to make one point here. Folks, omitted variables, this may be the world's worst title for a slide ever. Here's what I should have said. Suppose that there is a community, let me make fun of myself since that will amuse everyone. Folks, suppose it's the case, and actually, this is actually an important point, so let me sober up. I had too many of those noodles. Folks, suppose it's the case that the community with the lowest pollution has the prettiest beach, but that the statistician has never visited Singapore and doesn't know that. So I'll repeat my point again. What I want to set up is if there's an omitted variable. An omitted variable is a terrible term for, are there other factors that are causing the home price to be high that the statistician nerd is ignoring? So suppose it's the case that clean communities have beautiful beaches, but that the statistician has never heard the word beach before. What fallacy will the nerd do when he does this math? So should I repeat that again, or is everyone with me? So the nerd observes all of this, all of the data to the left, but the nerd doesn't know that the least polluted areas have the most beautiful beaches, while the most polluted areas have horrible beaches. What mistake in logic will the statistician make as he runs his regressions and calculates his standard errors and plots this and that? Yes, so she said correlation versus causation. She's correct, but what did you mean? What mistake? Why would we give Kahn a D? I said that we immediately learned that people value clean air at $5,000 a day. They're willing to pay at least $5,000 to avoid a dirty day. If that beach is lurking, is that statement true? The answer is no, because as you guys understand, the price premium in this community versus this one is some amalgam of the reduction in pollution, but also because this has a better beach. And we're unable to disentangle. If the better beaches are in the low pollution areas, then we're not able to assign this extra $100,000 to the pollution versus the beach. And so omitted variables is a dagger in the heart. Anyone ever feel any emotion towards economists? I'm married to an economist. If you ever feel sorry for an economist, pray for us over omitted variables. Because it means that our inference from our studies are in question. And so every academic study faces this challenge. Are there other factors lurking out there that you, the nerd statistician, haven't taken into account that truly explain this variation? And it's a very hard problem. And but I think you guys now get it, so I thank you for that. Let's skip this. I worked with a great team of co-authors. Actually, let's spend 1 minute on this, but I'm beginning to watch the clock. We're down to 32 minutes. In China, I mentioned to you that our work that within Beijing, that those parts of Beijing that are more polluted, that properties sell for a price discount. In a recent paper that we published and that we're quite proud of, we studied real estate prices across China's cities. And we found in a similar spirit that all else equal, those Chinese cities that have higher pollution have lower real estate prices. And so this raises an issue of residential sorting. Will it be the case, I want to focus your attention on this bottom bullet point. Will it be the case in China that some of China's cities, like Shanghai, will have a sharp improvement in their quality of life, but will only the very rich be able to live there? And so I'm very interested in the idea of environmental progress in China, but will middle class and poor people be able to enjoy these areas, or will these paradises be, like Santa Monica, the enclave of the very wealthy? And that's something to think about, which I'm going to be coming back to. Folks, I now want to make a new point. So somebody define for me what a snowball is. In Singapore, does it snow often? So where have you run into the snowball effect before? This is a scientific term from economics. That was a joke. So one answer I received was housing prices going down. So actually, let's do that. That's an excellent example. So in the United States, when the foreclosure crisis started, housing prices started to fall. As housing prices started to fall, guys who were highly leveraged are now underwater. The value of their house is less than their mortgage. So folks, what did those guys do? They defaulted. As neighborhoods start to default en masse, is anyone mowing their lawn? Is anyone spraying for mosquitoes? Is anyone taking care of their swimming pools? And so to build on his point, when the recession started in the U.S., that started a negative snowball effect, that whole neighborhoods started to default. And when homeowners defaulted on their homes, the quality of life in the neighborhood declined as owners stopped investing in their property. And there started to be illegal squatters, and just a whole bunch of quality of life challenges arose. Folks, I want to tell the opposite story. How many of you subscribe to real estate economics? Tough group. For anyone who makes it through the 4 nights, I will give away a free subscription to real estate economics. Tianfu, will you hold me to that? I want to hear some applause. Wait. Well, that was funny. So the next slide's going to be good when we go to Grace 1, but this slide's going to be painful. What Sichi and I did, folks, in the run-up to the Beijing Olympics, of 2008, the Chinese government made enormous investments to beautify Beijing. Has anyone seen the bird's nest? I may buy that. So they built the Olympic Village, and they also built several new subways. The government and the local government invested billions in improving the quality of life to get ready for the Olympics. What Sichi and I studied in that paper was a snowball effect, where what we did was the following. I'm going to go back to my map of Beijing. I wish I had a map to show you. We made a new map of Beijing where we put on the Olympic Village and we superimposed the subway lines. And we asked the following question. Folks, do I have anyone here interested in real estate development? So, a question. If the government takes an underperforming part of the city and invests in beautifying it and in building subway lines, how could a young real estate developer make some money? How would the private sector respond to this public sector investment? Can someone help an old professor?
Buy land around the new infrastructure coming up.
And do what with it? Yes! And so that's all we did in this paper. It's easy to publish. So to repeat what these guys just said, what we did was the following. We did an analysis of how the private sector responds to public sector investment. And as he just said, and let's go through it, but through it quickly, what we document with our statistical study is as the Chinese government built the Olympic Village and the subway lines, the private developers purchased the land close to the Olympic Village and close to the new subway stops. They erected new housing towers that they sold at high prices. And so they built more units that they sold at higher prices. And then we did a funny thing. We also coded up new Starbucks and Kentucky Fried Chicken and other private restaurants. All these private restaurants, which used to not locate in these areas, all of a sudden popped up. And so that's what I mean by gentrification. Gentrification means an area that was below average income all of a sudden becoming above average income of who moves in terms of stores, commercial, residential, retail. And so the Chinese government triggered a private sector response that led to an upgrading of these neighborhoods. Now, this is not a free lunch. Some government money was used to make this investment, and some people who lived in the Olympic Village area were displaced. Whether they were compensated for the land, I don't know, and we talk about that in our paper, but that new exciting areas were created in this private-public partnership. Folks, I want to switch gears, and I want to tell a scary story, but what all of these stories have in common. Ooh, the professor did a bad job. Can I turn back time like Cher? Folks, does everyone remember that I started this lecture with the overpriced little house? And that we're talking about residential real estate and location. Can I hear everyone say location, location, location? And so we did it once with the Santa Monica house. We did it once in Beijing. We did it once with this. And then we did it again across Chinese cities. I now want to tell a story. Grace Wang wrote a very interesting PhD at Princeton University that should interest everyone. Whenever I see her, I talk about it. She says, please stop talking about my research. I say, I'm a great fan of her work. Folks, Hong Kong suffered from this terrible SARS outbreak. Was it in 2003? What she studied in her research, and I'm about to make my first trip to Hong Kong, so I am not an expert on Hong Kong, but I'm looking forward to going, but I've very, very much enjoyed my time here. What she studied was, as the SARS outbreak broke out, she studied how home prices started to change in different neighborhoods within Hong Kong. So folks, let me say that again, because I was not very articulate. Think of yourself and think if you lived in Hong Kong in 2003. The SARS outbreak is out. I don't believe that there was Twitter back then. There would be rumors. There was an internet back then. There'd be news. Folks, why should real estate prices be affected by SARS? What was this lady doing? How could this be a Princeton dissertation? I'm kidding. It's an excellent piece of research. Why could there be why could a SARS outbreak affect real estate prices in Hong Kong? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear who was speaking. That's an A+ answer. What I heard him say when I heard him was fear of infection. So folks, what could a geographer do? Did SARS occur randomly? If we made a map of the SARS outbreak, would it just look like a random Rorschach test? As I understand it, and I'm not an expert on infectious disease, my father hopes I'll still go to medical school. Somebody must have gotten infected, and then you infect other people in a radius around you, and then panic and fear set off. Folks, how can that affect? So if you put a map of changes in real estate prices in Hong Kong and you superimpose that on the SARS map, so let me ask again, why would fear of infection affect Hong Kong rental prices? What happens next? I'm sorry? No, so demand falls. Folks, there's supply and demand. Everyone make an X at the professor. Let me see it. Supply and demand, let's see it. So what am I going to shift in those neighborhoods with the highest SARS penetration? Are we going to shift the supply curve or the demand curve? As I say to my son, you got 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. He doesn't talk to me. We're going to shift the demand curve in. The supply, the housing's still there, but the demand for housing in the infected region falls. And so the fascinating part, let's just read the slide. It was fascinating in her work that real estate prices very quickly reflect new news. So let me set this up because it's important to me, and I know it's getting late, but it's important to me that you understand this because this was brilliant work. As the SARS outbreak broke out, it broke out in specific Hong Kong neighborhoods, and she documented using a statistical analysis her statistical analysis used geocoded data on the price of real estate at different parts of Hong Kong at different points in time to document that Hong Kong real estate prices quickly adjusted to reflect the new news that neighborhoods that were infected, prices fell sharply, reflecting perceived risk. Now, what I never spoke to her about is as the SARS epidemic faded, did the prices then jump up? Because, folks, let me ask you a question. Why would we predict as young real estate experts that when did the SARS epidemic fade? When was it over? You can name any date, I won't know. Can we say 2004? So let me ask you, I want to ask a no arbitrage question. If the SARS epidemic in Hong Kong were over by February 2004, why would a real estate economist predict that real estate prices will jump up? What happens next? If real estate prices are real low, but the SARS epidemic is over, how can you make a fortune? Do I have any young Don Trumps here? You should buy up that stuff. Because the key to arbitrage is buy low, sell high. If the price is low because of SARS, but SARS is now gone, there's a free lunch to purchase this asset. And so basic no arbitrage logic would suggest that as the crisis passed, the prices should revert back to their pre-trend. But I don't believe she wrote that paper. What is unique about California? So I don't know where these slides came from. Let us look at this for a second and see if we want to talk about this. Yes, I think this is I see why I want to talk about this. Folks, what we're doing in the end game here, and I apologize, it's past my bedtime. What we're going to do in the end game here is in our study of real estate and location, Grace Wong's study was our first example of dynamics, of how the price of real estate changes over time. For example, I know that Singapore prices have been rising. Los Angeles prices fell sharply in the Great Recession, but have risen sharply recently. So where I'm ending my lecture tonight is talking about real estate price dynamics and local quality of life. So I want us to talk a little bit about California. The unique God-given characteristics of California is access to the coast, the absence of humidity, that every day it's 75 degrees and every day there's sunshine and basically no rain, and this ability to go from the beach to the mountains, as I showed you in that Los Angeles picture. Folks, have you heard of Zillow before? Zillow is the American data service where you can study the price of real estate at any point in time. So Zillow is an American company, and I want to show you the following, even though this looks kind of terrible. Time starts in the year 1997. Time goes till the year 2013. These are months passing. On the vertical axis are dollars. And I graphed three things, and let me help everyone. The lowest line are home prices in the United States. So, folks, isn't it kind of interesting that home prices in the United States rose from 1997 until roughly 2008 and only fell a little bit? The upper two lines, the top line is Los Angeles, LA, and this line is California. So the first point I want you to see is in levels. So I'm pricing homes. I'm pricing different residential single-family homes across the United States in Los Angeles, California, and the U.S. over 16 years. So do you see that California and Los Angeles have always had higher home prices than the rest of the country? You can calculate at any point in time, draw a vertical line. So does everyone see in the great run-up, so between 2003 and 2008, does everyone see that California and Los Angeles outperformed the nation? But then, does everyone see the crash? Of course, my wife and I bought at the peak. You can take high nominal salaries, scale by infinity, and you get real consumption of zero. But notice that despite the crash, and now things are trending up again as the nation has been flat. And so it's fascinating that the California premium is always there. California is always priced higher, and California is not a productive place. We are a plastic people who care about looks. They're thinking in San Jose, but everywhere else, no. It's just a place to live. And notice that LA and California moved for a while, but starting in roughly 2001, LA has outperformed California and has diverged. The distance between LA and California has gone up relative to here. So, folks, what are your theories? If I put this on your final exam, what would be your explanations for why LA has outpaced California in terms of California as a whole in terms of real estate prices? So if we calculated rates of return, we calculate the percent change in the price of real estate, what would be your theory? Are some of you employment people, that LA has created more jobs than the rest of California? Answer to that is no. Every job is leaving LA. The Lakers are the last 11 jobs. And the Laker girls. And the guys who sell beer. So there's 36 people working in the Staples Center. And so, of course, my hypothesis is LA's improving quality of life. That there's more and more people from China. There's more and more international people. In my community, there's all these Persians who, when the Shah fell in 1979, all these rich Persian people brought their families to the area around Westwood and purchased much of the real estate. There's huge international demand to be in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and it's not because of jobs. It's that these are kick-ass cities. And in the global international market for real estate, these are great places to live. And that's a hypothesis, and it could be false, but I believe my hypothesis. These data came from Zillow, and you guys can look this up. Let's skip this. This is boring. This is boring. Something I want folks to think about is the following. Folks, how many of you have been to Berkeley, California? To UC Berkeley? So it's a very distinctive, interesting community, very close to the Bay Bridge, and to UC Berkeley. I'm very interested in the subject of green cities, of when a city has a high quality of life, when a neighborhood has a high quality of life, who chooses to live in those areas? So something you see in the beach community of Santa Monica, which is Los Angeles' beach community, and in Berkeley, is you see very distinctive, funky people choosing to live in these areas. They're opening tofu restaurants and other different stores. So I'm very interested in the synergy between interesting, high quality of life areas and who chooses to live in those areas, so that the people who self-select to live in a Greenwich Village in New York City or in a trendy part of Singapore, that an emergent property of such individuals living there is to further change the community. So this is sort of a snowball also. So our first example of the snowball was in China, in Beijing, of the government investing and then private investors building condos and introducing interesting stores. A second example is where there's natural beauty, whether it's in a Portland or a Seattle or in these areas, and then individuals who choose to live there creating their own ecosystem of this. Just like there's a complementarity between peanut butter and jelly, that you take a naturally beautiful area, and the set of men and women who choose to live in such an area bring in a different culture to the area that further makes it unique and interesting. I want to ask two more questions and end the night. One of the topics we're going to be talking about in later lectures is for a business person who's focused just on making money. And I don't mean to pick on Don Trump. So did people, what was his television show? It wasn't The Biggest Loser. It was Your Apprentice or something. I'm friends with his daughter on Facebook. You can friend Ivana Trump. She posts a lot of pictures of herself selling stuff. And so we don't seem to be good friends. She's always marketing something. And and none of my friends are impressed that she's my friend. So I've achieved none of my goals. But something that interests me very much is for a theme we're going to come back to in a later night, is for the major developers, whether they're in Singapore, in some part of Asia, or in the U.S., what is their incentive to go green? And so I continue to think about this, and this is not a great slide, but something I want you guys to think about going into our next lectures is, if there is a real estate developer who is focused on profit maximization, if they have acquired a given geographic location, whether it has a beach view or whether it's next to Central Park, the developer has the right incentives to think through, are there investments that they can make such that they can charge an even higher price, either renting it out as a rental or selling it? And so the capitalist will always think in terms of his or her own self-interest. And for the developer, your profit, as you all know, is you try to buy land cheaply, you try to get the rights to develop that land, and then you try to sell it for the maximum amount. According to hedonic analysis, if you believe the analysis we did of Beijing, you can sell. The real estate developer has incentives to think about what green features, whether it's green space, whether it's ventilation, whether it's energy efficiency, what features of the units can be introduced that complement the geographic location. So let me ask you guys to help me out. If you owned a nice piece of property as a developer near a beach, what features might you build into your new property so that you could sell or lease it if it's a hotel for even more money? What are some things you would do with that asset? So we've got one, to plant trees. What else would you guys do?
Make sure every room has a view of the city.
Excellent. Make sure every room has a view of the city. Maybe if the economists come, you could give us a back lot of the back. The other idea of other things you would introduce? So I would have my one piece on and would be kept far away. I could be one of those Walmart greeters. And so this is the free market environmentalism, where we don't have any government here. This is a profit maximizing firm who knows that they have a unique asset, proximity to the Pacific Ocean, and that they have the right incentives, perhaps to do everything you guys listed, to maximize the value and the experience so that people with scarce money are willing to pay a fair bit for this. And I have no idea what I meant by left shoes and right shoes. We covered this a little. I think I want to skip these. That in the United States, during the summers in New York City, nobody is in New York City. They retreat to a place in Long Island called the Hamptons, where these are $20 million homes right on the beach. So a Jerry Seinfeld, leading comedians are living in these enormous things, as are hedge fund giants. And so for real estate developers, it's hard to acquire this land, but these men and women who develop on this property would have the right incentives to create beach views and beauty to create a unique asset. And so I'm very interested in the synergy between what Mother Nature gives us and what developers build to maximize the synergy and thus the revenue of the price you can charge for these properties. And so I think that that's common sense, but I think you'll see more and more of that. I think in the name of time, I want to skip this. And so here's my concluding thoughts, because I want to spend a couple minutes here and then let you guys ask me anything. There's always, in real estate, there's always going to be a price premium for quality. Folks, this is a very important point. Many labor economists have noted that income inequality is rising around the world. The explanation for this is skill-biased technological change. And let me explain. Have you noticed that computers are doing more and more tasks? Has anyone called a credit card company and dealt with a computer rather than a human? Has anyone been to an ATM machine rather than a bank teller? And so what we're having more and more of in our modern economy is that computers are taking middle-class jobs. What leading labor economists have argued is the following. Computers make skilled people more productive. Folks, this talk would have really stunk without PowerPoint. I would have just been waving at you, and you would have been looking at me. Computers are replacing many middle-class jobs. And so there's been a carve-out of the income distribution that computers are replacing. We don't need bank tellers anymore. Many middle-class jobs have vanished because of computers, while computers have made guys like me stronger. And so a claim is that income inequality is rising in modern capitalism as the returns to education increase, and those who don't have an NUS degree or equal degree have a problem. And so an issue is as income inequality increases in urbanized nations around the world, the price premium for excellent real estate is likely to rise. And it's the rich who are going to be able to afford these scarce properties. And so a big question in the United States right now is the following question. Is New York City becoming too fancy? There is an open question right now that the middle class can't afford to live in Manhattan. And there is an open debate among liberals and conservatives of the following question. So does everyone know that the mayor of New York City is worth $20 billion? He gets paid $1 a year, so he's a cheap mayor. But that in this day and age, the United States' greatest cities have become unaffordable for the middle class. And so a question that is being debated in intellectual circles for those interested in real estate is, if your city attracts the leading 1%, does this benefit the middle class? There is a liberal line that says no. When you attract the 1%, these guys bid up real estate prices, and the middle class can only afford to live in the city if there's rent control. There is an alternative view out there that if you attract the super rich, if you have progressive taxation, where progressive taxation is you charge richer people more. If you have a city with unique quality of life, you can tax rich people more and they will continue to live there because they prefer that city to alternatives, even if those alternatives have lower taxes. So there's a counter argument that says a city with great quality of life that attracts an abundance of billionaires, you can tax these individuals and give the city the resources to redistribute back to other groups. And so I bring this up because I think there's an important interplay between green cities, equilibrium real estate prices, and in a diverse society, who can afford to live there? And I don't know all the answers here. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I will stick around to talk to anyone who doesn't run home. But we have at least 5 minutes for questions. Yes?
Can I ask a question from the first lecture?
Yes.
What I'm interested in is when there are many things like that, so there's some practicality to that. So there's one question which you asked which was quite intriguing, several questions that which is what can a mayor do for that city, country? What can the mayor do? Now, are we making the assumption here that that mayor actually wants to do anything? And if he wants to do something, what can he do about it? I mean, you brought up some points which are physical attributes of quality of living. If he followed that same recipe, would he have gotten a better city as a result? But you've also talked about cycles, feedback cycles, where in the case of those cycles, as you said, learning gets learning, and in the case of a bad city, you attract bad people, not bad people, but people who don't really care about the environment and will stay in the rut for a long time. So really, I mean, for a mayor who wants to do something, what can he realistically do?
So I think that's an excellent question. So the question is, what do mayors control in their city? 2 points there, because I don't fully know the answer to your question. A colleague of mine at UCLA, who's the chair of the urban planning department, Lois, I'm blanking on Lois's last name. She went to Vietnam 15 years ago, and she surveyed the urban residents in the informal areas of what are the quality of life challenges they face. And they named rats, that there wasn't proper garbage pickup, and that this had led to a huge rodent problem. And so she did a very nice analysis that if the mayor was committed to improving life in the informal areas, that her first priority, that the lowest hanging fruit, would be to have done a better job on garbage pickup. And so in a case like that, the mayor has used a survey instrument, has taken seriously what the people have to say, and then there'd be a question, how much money does it take for proper garbage pickup, and how do you incentivize the public sector unions or whoever's in charge of garbage to actually service these communities? And so just as that was a long-winded way of saying, a doctor first pokes you around. I go to the doctor often, and these guys weigh me and tell me I'm fat. But they poke you, they look at you for rashes, and they try to diagnose what's the matter with you. In a similar sense, I would hope that a mayor, either out of fear of not being reelected or due to compassion for his or her people, would first do a diagnosis of what's the problems in this city, and either use some technical staff or just survey the people themselves, saying, what is your priority of what you wish I would be doing? For example, in Singapore, when I read the Straits Times, I have been reading pieces about housing affordability and about that the buses are taking too long. And so it's interesting to see the people of Singapore speaking about their priorities, and the government has been saying, at least, we're on it. And so I think there has to be a discovery process of what are the priorities of the people, and in a just society, what are the priorities of the poorest people? So there's a question, a mayor would have to make a decision. If he or she has scarce resources, do you focus on the poorest, or do you focus on the potential footloose skilled who might leave? And that is an equity versus efficiency trade-off. But I would hope that the rational mayor creates a list of what are the greatest challenges the city faces, and then given a budget constraint, where is there the greatest bang per buck for solving the city's problems? And in the United States, with these regular elections, many mayors have been voted out who haven't delivered the goods. And so you need in the United States, we need competition in political elections to hold these guys' feet to the fire of how people express their desire for change.
One other question would be,
Yes.
One of the possible solutions to address this issue would be to actually intensify the density of
in safer areas.
But you also mentioned that the city is unique in its own way. Some people like it because of how it is. So
So that's an excellent question, and what you just posed is what many of the older ladies who throw shoes at me say. So to repeat his question for the mic, I am reimagining Beach Santa Monica. There are many widows living in those homes I showed you saying, we love our life. We don't want 1 million people moving to our community. There is always, here's what I say, and let me be serious for a moment. There are many beach communities in California. I would hold an auction to find that community along the Pacific Ocean that has the least distaste for density, and I would incentivize them to rezone. And so there are ways to have a density auction and to reward those communities. So in the United States, zoning is local. Local communities. So Los Angeles is comprised of 88 cities. Each of those cities controls their own zoning. On some level, that's crazy. You can imagine a very different model where the mayor of Los Angeles works with an urban planning council to decide zoning. And so the United States has very decentralized land regulation, and that leads some communities to block improvements that would be likely to improve everyone's quality of life. So my short answer to his correct point is I would try to identify those coastal communities which would be willing to accept higher density and to reward them for doing so. And then I think that the older ladies would stop throwing shoes at me when I talk about my book in public. And it's no fun to be hit by a shoe, even their shoe. Yes. Yes. I agree. So he asked an excellent question. Recall early in my lecture I talked about the golden goose. Every mayor he or she must make a decision of what industries. Pittsburgh was a steel town. Now it's a university and brain town. He just told a very interesting story that Dalian has some natural beauty and has many natural assets, but that the mayor, and the case fascinates me, apparently tried to recruit a dirty chemical company, which would undo much of the natural beauty. And so that comes to the fact, it might be that the mayor argued that this would create jobs for certain parts of for certain individuals. It may be that the mayor didn't believe that the green economy is a sustainable golden goose. So I think you've raised a fascinating counterexample, and I'd actually want to work on that. And so with every theory, it's very important to confront evidence. And so I think that's a fascinating example. Folks, let's do this, since I've already kept you 4 minutes late. Let me dismiss, but I'm going to stick around to chat with folks, and with no guilt, have a good night, and we will regroup tomorrow.